Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hello, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Hi Tom, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Of course
Good.
you are. You're always well. I'm great, thanks, and I'm really looking forward to challenging some people's thinking around coaching with you today.
Me too. I'm always ready for a challenge. I like to think things through. I like to challenge myself. So yes, definitely up for a challenge.
Excellent. So today's challenging question is, what place does accountability have in coaching?
Accountability.
I feel like I want to go dun, 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 dun.
Go on then, do it. Oh, you did it already.
Yeah.
So, accountability in coaching, I think it exists. I'm not sure why. Well, I kind of understand why it exists, but I have my reservations about it. So let's explore it a little bit. So quite often when I'm talking to other coaches or seeing things posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah, in marketing and...
Yeah, people will say, I will be your accountability partner.
Yep.
I will hold you to account for whatever it is that we're doing. And that's seen as a great thing. And I've seen coachees or people that have been coached say, oh, she's great, she holds me to account. But I'm a bit dubious about what it actually means. So I did some research a couple of years ago around accountability with coaches and asked coaches, do you use accountability in your coaching? And almost without fail, everyone that responded to the survey said, yes, I do. But then I asked them some follow-up questions. So what does that look like in coaching? And they said, well, we look at what they've said they're going to do and whether they've done it. I said, but what happens when they don't do it? And I said, well, we'll talk about it and we'll talk about the reasons why. So to me, that is just coaching. That's not accountability because there is no consequence of them not doing, not taking the action they were going to take. So I think we will coach people around their goals and how they're moving towards them. But I don't think as coaches, we hold people to account. We are not their dad. We are not their boss. We're not there to make sure they do what they say they want to do. That's down to them. Yeah,
and sometimes what I found is that when people have set themselves a task, they will do it because they know they're seeing you. But that's not because I hold them to account. That's because there's a deadline, really, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that sort of almost false deadline, because there is no real deadline, is there? I mean, They will set themselves a deadline and they may well be coming back to you and thinking, oh, I better do that because I'm going back to see him or her. But I don't think that is accountability. I think that's them using that as a bit of a timestamp.
Yes.
So I think I walk alongside people whilst they're taking action, and I will inquire and I'll show curiosity around the actions they said they were going to take. And if they've not managed to do what they said they were going to do, we'll explore it. And some of it might be procrastination. Some of it might be life got in the way. Some of it might be that those things weren't that important in the first place. So the goals have actually set for themselves. When they've come to do it, come to take the action they said they were going to take, they've realised it's not that important. Now, that's all good coaching territory, and we can explore that and explore what would be more important to do. But it's not for me to say, well, you said you were going to do it, and you haven't done it, so what's going on there? We don't have that relationship in the coaching room. I come to coaching very much as an equal with my coachee, and I want to maintain that relationship throughout. I don't want there ever to be a time where they feel like they're beholden to me and they have to justify themselves to me. Now, there are exceptions. So there are elements of coaching that they are accountable for.
Okay, so what are those elements? What might they be?
Well, turning up to the coaching sessions, I think we have an agreement that I will coach them and they will show up and they will pay me for the coaching. So if they're not going to show up, then I want to know 48 hours in advance. So they're accountable for that. And it's a consequence for them not being accountable. So if they just don't show up, then I will charge them. If they give me 48 hours notice, that's fine. We'll postpone it. But there is that agreement, and that's something that I will hold them to account for. I hold them to account for paying me. That's something else in the coaching room. That's important. And also being on time. Now, the consequence of not being on time is that they miss part of the session. So I'm not going to overrun because they are late. Obviously, if I'm late, I would give them the time I had suggested we were going to have. But if they turn up late, we'll run to the original time. So there is an accountability element to coaching in that part, but not in terms of the actions they're going to take.
And that's probably a key element that you mentioned there, that there are consequences. So when we see in the news, politicians must be held accountable, that's about there being a consequence to their actions or inactions. And like you say, with these elements that you've just mentioned, there are consequences to them. But we can't enforce any kind of consequence should they not, phone the person and get the information that they said they were going to do, for example.
No, and I take responsibility for the coaching session. So it's my job to manage the coaching, to make sure that we're having a coaching conversation and not just a chat. I try to make sure that we're moving forward in the coaching conversation, that there's some progress. Obviously, if the coachee walks away and does nothing, I'm not taking responsibility for that, and they are accountable for that to themselves, but not to me.
So you mentioned there the coachee being accountable to themselves. What do you mean by that?
Well, obviously, if the coachee has goals and there's actions that they have recognised would be useful to take in order to meet those goals, their desired objective, then they are accountable for the motivation, the impetus to actually take those actions. But even with that, my role as a coach is to work on the psychology of motivation, look at strategies of how they might go about taking those actions. So we are sharing that journey together. There is that co-creation of actions and movement towards the desired goals. And if they do take the actions, then I'll be congratulating them and we'll be setting new actions for the future. But that comes from a place when I'm congratulating them or exploring what's gone on for them, it comes from a place of curiosity and not judgment.
Mm. And there has to be a question raised if someone says they want to do something, have said they're committed to an action, and then they don't do it, then we have to look at and question, is the thing they're aiming for really what they want to do?
Yeah, and sometimes people will set objectives for themselves that ultimately don't have any meaning to them. Now, if we're doing our coaching well, that shouldn't happen. We should have that exploration of what they want to change, what goals they want to set, what desired objectives they have. That should all come out during the coaching conversation. But sometimes people will just have an idea of in their head of what they want to do and just set off on that journey without really exploring the consequences.
And that's about taking things deeper as a coach, just to make sure that that motivation is an intrinsic motivation and it's something that they really, really want to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Power through.
Yeah.
So why do you think that accountability has become such a big concept in coaching?
I think it's mainly due to the fact that coaching as we know it really started in organisations and it was a management tool. So people were being coached perhaps by their managers, who they were accountable to. And then beyond that, external coaches came in or internal coaches were trained up. But there was still a requirement from the organisation that something happened, that progress was made perhaps towards goals, but certainly towards development. And that's what they were paying the coaches for. So I think that accountability element was there from an organisational perspective.
Interesting. So what would you recommend that coaches do if they're asked by their coachee to act as their accountability partner?
Well, my first thought is that the coach should ask themselves what their role is as a coach, what their intention is for the coaching, and who they actually want to be in the coaching room. So, like I say, I don't want to be someone's dad. I don't want to be their boss. I don't work for an organisation because that structural, that hierarchy doesn't really appeal to me. So I don't want to be holding people to account. Maybe that's just me, but that's my approach to coaching. So I would ask them to think about how they will nurture that sense of autonomy in the coachee, that sense of them being able to self-coach eventually and to be able to move forward without the coach. That's the ultimate aim, isn't it? That we're facilitating their empowerment.
Yes.
And if part of the coaching is that they keep having to come back to us to be coached in order to move forward, then we're not really doing them a great service. There's still a reliance on us.
Yeah, that's creating that reliance, that dependence rather than independence.
And I did have someone that came to a coaching group that I was running that was coaching a salesperson, and she'd been coaching him every week for 3 months, and was really worried because his performance was starting to slip off. It'd been great initially. She'd done fantastic. The salesperson had been fantastic, and everyone was praising her on her coaching, but then his performance was starting to drop off. And she said, I'm just really worried that if I stop coaching him, it will all fall apart and they'll blame me and I won't get any more work. And then, from an ethical perspective, what is going on there? Like, it seemed that her objective was to make sure the person performed well in a sales role so that she would get more work. And so, that for me was not an ethical approach to coaching. And she wasn't empowering the salesperson to be motivated, to have strategies that they could work on for themselves. The salesperson was totally dependent on the coach being there and acting as their manager, really. That's the manager's job, isn't it? To make sure that they're performing. So I think, we have to be careful when we are holding people to account of what that does for them, whether that provides them with any sense of autonomy at all.
And I think on that point, it's worth saying that if someone's listening and thinking, oh my goodness, this is ringing bells for me, I'm wondering if someone's becoming dependent on me, that's something to take to a supervisor and have supervision over and have a discussion.
Yeah, I think it's important to do that. And I think the lady's learning that was in that conversation with me about that, because I made it clear my thoughts on it, that this did seem to be that dependency builder. She no longer works in that environment. So she's taken herself out of that. And I think it was a bit of a wake-up call to her of, okay, what am I actually doing? And I think she recognised she'd sort of become his manager. Which wasn't what she wanted to be. She wanted to coach, and I know that she does great work in that coaching space now, but I think that was a bit of a learning point for her. Interestingly, the Association for Coaching has as one of its requirements, one of its competencies, that's the word, thank you, that the coach will leave accountability with the client while following through on the coach's own actions. So we take responsibility for what we've said we're going to do, but we leave that accountability with the coachee. So I think that's a good place to leave accountability. I think people will make their own minds up about their approach to accountability. I think we offer one perspective, and it's for other people to decide how much they want to hold people to account. But it's certainly not my way of coaching.
No, and I think that's because we both see ourselves in a different way as transformational coaches who help people to become the best version of themselves. And that's not always about goals.
It isn't at all. Excellent stuff. Thank you, Helen. That's been great. Next time on the podcast, we'll be exploring a different topic. What will we be exploring next time, Helen?
We will be exploring a topic that we both really enjoy, which is positive psychology and its relationship with coaching.
Wonderful stuff. I look forward to that.
Me
so
too.
We will see you all next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.